Funds in Simple Budget are spending or income categories designed to help you manage your spending and saving in specific spending areas. There are two kinds of funds: expense funds for spending and income funds. Expense funds are normally used whenever you spend your money or pay your bills. Income funds are normally designated as income, like your paycheck. In Simple Budget, you can easily add, change names, or delete funds. To work with funds in Simple Budget, click on the Budget and then Funds tab. Now in this sample, I have one income fund set as my paycheck, and that's designated by the plus sign. And if you want to create a new fund for income, you just select the income fund, and then all the expense funds are shown with a minus sign, and these are some sample funds that I have set up in here. I'm going to set up a sample budget amounts in my funds. Now, the budget in Simple Budget must be balanced, so it needs to be balanced between all the expense funds and the income fund. Now, I currently only have one income fund called My Paycheck, and I'm going to arbitrarily set that at $2,000. So we'll pretend that my monthly income is $2,000, and I just set that and click change. Now it says the budget is not balanced, and it shows an unallocated amount of $2,000. That means I have $2,000 that I need to divide up between all of our expense funds, and I will go ahead and put some values in this just to use up that $2,000, and it has to balance, so it has to equal exactly the $2,000 that we're going to estimate that we're going to have as income for the month. As I arbitrarily add amounts in here for the budget amounts, you'll see that the unallocated amount will go down. So under fuel, I will arbitrarily add $200, and that's what our budget would be for 1 month. Change that, and now we see it's $1,800. And so we need to keep adding to the funds of what we want our budget to be, and then once it's balanced, we will be finished. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, I arbitrarily set up the budget funds for some of the funds we have here, and we now have that the amount unallocated is 0 and the budget is balanced, and the budget has to be balanced for this to work. And what I normally do is I have some category, in this case we will call savings other, where we put some amount of extra from our budget. I encourage you to spend less than you make and always have some sort of spending category or savings category. So we will use this particular savings other later on, but our monthly budget is now set. So we have an income of $2,000 for our paycheck, and I divided that $2,000 in several of the funding categories. One of my favorite reports to look at the overall budget is View Reports, and then the second report here, View Fund Details. And this will show each fund along with what we're budgeted, what we start with in the fund, and our current balance. Now, as you see here, my paycheck amount says negative $2,000. That means we did not get a paycheck yet, and no paycheck was deposited. This is just the budget amount for the month. So for all these budget funds, fuel is $200, clothing $50, etc. And we have several funds in here that are allocated with numbers adding up to $2,000, but there's no money in our bank account. So at the bottom, it's a little summary. It says the amount of expenses is 0, the amount of income is 0, and our net total is 0. So total available for all funds is 0, but all expense funds require $2,000. So that means we need to get a paycheck before we can start spending any of this money out of our funds. Now let's say that currently in our bank we do have some funds, and we want to divide those current funds up into several of these funds so there's actually money in the bank. And this is before we get our first paycheck into this budget, but this is just the current funds that we might have in the bank. The way we do that is go to transactions transfers, and we're going to make an initial deposit of whatever we have currently in our bank account so that it is in the budget. Okay, the funds are set up, but there's no money in the account. So let's look at the fund details report. And this shows that our start balance of everything is 0. Our paycheck amount is negative $2,000. That means there's no money in the account. And so the available for all funds is 0, and all expense funds require $2,000. So if you add all these expense funds budgeted here, they all add up to $2,000, which is our budget. So we need money in the account before we can use any of these funds. Now if your paycheck comes at the first of the month, you can just deposit it in directly and these funds would be available. But a lot of times our paycheck is not at the first of the month, so we need to deposit a certain amount of money to cover these. Now there's a couple of different ways of doing this. One way of doing this is to just make a transaction as a deposit into Simple Budget. And so let's say that you have $3,000 in your bank account when you're setting up this budget. So let's close out of this and we can go transaction transfers, and we will just simply deposit $3,000. To do this, we click the income credit radio button, type 3,000, and we need a payee, so that would be, we could just call that anything, current bank balance or some such thing, or initial deposit or anything like that. And we want it to go into my paycheck, and it will go into this bank account. We only have one bank account set up. We will call First Bank, and we can enter that transaction, and we have an opportunity to put a note here too, and we might put initial balance or something like that. And then click enter transaction. Okay, now that shows that the First Bank balance is $3,000 here, and my paycheck balance is $1,000. So let's exit out of here and look at our view fund details report. And my paycheck, we start off with 0. The budget was negative $2,000. That means that's an income fund that needs to be put in the account, and we put $3,000 in, so it says current balance is $1,000. Now this is not our paycheck that we normally get, so when we get a normal paycheck we would put it in here also, and this would end up $2,000 more than this, so it would say $3,000 because our initial balance in our paycheck was negative 2,000. We added 3,000, and then we will add the regular paycheck of 2,000. So really we have $3,000 excess in this fund that we can now divide up between all of these other funds to have an initial balance in there, because it says a total available for all funds now is 3,000. All expense funds require 2,000. So when we put our regular paycheck in here, this will say $3,000. So that'll be $3,000 over of the budgeted amount for that one income fund, and we really want that to be in these other funds. So the way we do that is go to transactions transfers, and now we can go fund transfers, and this way we can take money out of the my paycheck, which is really $3,000 over budget, and put them in our other funds. So the way we can do that is put an amount that we want to subtract out of that my paycheck fund, and let's say we want 200 of it from my paycheck fund, and we want it to go into the fuel fund. Now up here shows everything that will be done, and then you can put a note in here if you want to that says initial fund, initial balance, or something like that. So we'll enter transaction, and then now if we go to we'll do another funds transfer, and if we go to that fuel, we'll see that it has $400. Now the reason there is, let's go back to our report, because we had nothing in there, and after we get our paycheck for $2,000, we'll have $200 to spend in there, but we just transferred $200 more in there. So even before your first paycheck, with this initial balance in there, we will have money in the account. Now remember that we have to have money in the account in spite of what the budget says to be able to spend it. And I like to do this. I like to get excess funds in each account, so when I do get my paychecks, that I will have money left over at the end of the month to start the next month before my paycheck arrives. So the next month, when we start a new month, whatever is at the current balance here will be put in the start balance, and before we even get another paycheck, that means we will have this start balance amount in the budget to spend the next month, even though throughout the month we'll have $200 extra when we get our paycheck. I hope that makes sense, because we need our paycheck to fill these funds before they can be spent. So we can continue going funds transfer, and transfer some from my paycheck into each of the other accounts where we want them to be placed. Now there's an alternative way also that we can do this. We can go if we didn't already deposit that just as a direct deposit into the budget account, we could go transactions transfers, then income, and instead of putting all that income into my paycheck, we could have divided it up and put it in each of these individual accounts as we want them. So we can, let's pretend we didn't put that initial $3,000 in our account, in the budget. Then we could go directly and say I want $200 from, and it'll have to say initial deposit, or something like that, and we want it to go into fuel from the first bank into the first bank account. And then we can say add split, and we can put another value in here, and we can say $50, and we want, this is just our initial input balance, and we can put $50, let's say, under clothing. So this shows what we have so far: $200 for auto, $50 for clothing. Then we can add split, and so we would take that initial $3,000 and put it in each individual fund, rather than putting it in my paycheck and then taking it out of there and put it in the funds. But we already put it in there. But this is the way you could do it also. So you could do it all at one big transaction of dividing it up by using split and putting it into each individual fund directly. I will continue to put them into each individual funds by going transfer and putting some, dividing it up from my paycheck, that excess $3,000, into all the individual funds to get a start in the budget. I'll do that and then come back. Okay, I've taken that $3,000 that we deposited as what was in our bank account and divided them up into various funds, and I put the excess in one called Savings Emergency Fund. Now we'll notice that I put in each fund the budget. Let's say, for example, auto fuel, the budget is $200 and I transferred in $200, so it shows a current balance of $400. Now remember, this $400 is what the balance would be after any of our paychecks are in the bank. So if we look down here, total available for all funds is the $3,000 we put in, but all expense funds require $5,000. That is because you haven't actually entered the paycheck yet. So this gives us a buffer room of, before the paycheck comes in at the beginning of the month, there's this balance in there, and then by the end of the month, if you're within your budget, this still should have a balance of $200 at the end of the month if you were within your budget. That way the next month starts off with $200 in it automatically, and that is great for those bills that you have to pay off at the first of the month. Many of our bills are due at the near the first of the month, so that's before a paycheck might come in. So I like this extra buffer at the end of the month that will go into the next month's budget and be there for those funds before there's actually a paycheck in the bank. That way it gives quite a buffer. So let's now say we got our paycheck. So we'll transfer, let's say we got our paycheck sometime later in the month, and that's, our paycheck is $2,000, and we want that income, and we can just write for the payee, it would be my work, whatever the name of your job is, that'd be the person paying you, and we want it into my paycheck, and enter. Now when we look at our fund detail reports, it shows my first paycheck. Now it shows a balance of 0. So it was negative 2,000, and now you added the 2,000, so it's 0. So now our funds are fully budgeted and fully met. All expense funds require 5,000. Total available for all funds is 5,000. So as you go through your month, you just need to make sure that you You cannot spend money that's not there, and having that extra buffer in there before your paycheck gets in helps, and it helps at the beginning of the next month before the paycheck is entered. I hope that all helps. Now during the month you'll add transactions, everything you spent money on, and let's say we spent $50 on gas, and here's where we can add a payee. Let's say your name of your gas station is My Gas and Go, and we want that to go to fuel, and so now we can save that payee and save the default fund where that goes, and it will go and come out of First Bank. We'll enter that transaction, and it says payee My Gas and Go saved. So that is saved, and now when we look at our fund details, we'll see that we have $50 taken out, and it shows that 25% of our budget is spent for the month. So that kind of, with that little bar graph, it shows is an easy way to see where you're in budget at. Now sometimes this will be over 100%, and that's okay because this is the envelope budgeting system. And so let's say you save for vacation $100 every month, and then when it comes time for vacation you spend $500, it'll show 500% over budget, but that's okay because you plan that, and there's still money in there because it saves it month to month. Now the next time you go in and do a transaction and you want to get more gas, My Gas and Go is in there, and you let's say you got $40 worth more of gas, and all you have to do, if this has a lot of different payees in it, just type My, and it'll find the first one, Gas and Go, and it knows it's fuel, and it knows it comes out of your First Bank account, and you hit enter transaction. It's that easy. And that way when you look at your transactions, now you're 45% in fuel, and you can look at the transactions, and we want the fuel one here. Yeah, here we go. Okay, first of all we had $40, then we had a $200 transfer from that initial bank deposit, and then we had $50. So I don't have the dates correct here because I was just randomly selecting dates, but that's the way it'll work out. It'll show all of those on here and then click this and you'll see your funds again. So I hope all that helps you get started.